Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the second story from chapter 39 of the Road to Latin textbook. Now this is called Daedalo et Icaro II, and it's continuing the story of Daedalus and Icarus that we already started in chapter 39. Now before we get into it, a couple things I just wanted to bring up. If you want to see the story in a little bit more detail and get some grammar notes, vocab, things like that, feel free to check out Nova Latin. You can find all my stuff there, just if you're looking for more resources to help you as you work your way through the textbook. The other thing that I would recommend, and you can use my site to do this, is before you dive into the story, just make sure that you feel really good about the vocab. I know this is the second story from chapter 39, so hopefully at this point you're feeling really confident, but it's always a good idea to brush up and just make sure that you know that vocab inside and out, because it's really hard to understand what's going on if you don't have the vocab, right? So that's always step one. The other thing I always say is take the story and read it aloud, right? Find a partner from class, read it to them. They can read it back to you. This way you're working on your speaking and your pronunciation as well as your listening skills. This is how you get really good at Latin. You never want to shut those off. So I'd always encourage you to do that with every one of these stories that we do. The last thing I'd encourage you to do is try the read and reread method. So you probably heard me say this before, but the idea is you take the story, you read through it once, you write down anything you don't understand, any problem areas. It could be vocab, it could be grammar, full sentences, parts of sentences, whatever it is, write it down on a list. When you make it through the entire chapter, go back and look at your list. Now, if it's a word that you don't know, that's pretty easy. Just look it up, easy enough, and memorize it for next time. If it's grammar, it's probably going to be something from this particular chapter. Maybe the new grammar is throwing you off, or something you can look up, right, and try to figure out, what's going on here. Once you do that, you go back and you try to read the story again, and you just repeat that process as many times as you need to until you're able to read through the story start to finish without needing any help. No vocab, grammar, anything like that, and you understand what's going on completely, or as close to completely as you possibly can, okay? If you can do that, you know you're in a good place and you're ready to move on to the next chapter. All right, so if you haven't done that yet, pause the video, go work on that. If you move forward the video now, we're going to cover the story. This should be a double check, so you should have already done that and you feel really confident in your work, and now you're just making sure that you're on the right track, okay? So story starts like this. You have Daedalus, insulam prima luce relinquere constituera. Okay, so Daedalus, he had decided to leave behind relinquere, the island, right? The insulam. Prima luce means at first light, right? You're just describing a timing word, right? So you have the adverb. So he decides to leave. He has the wings. He's ready to go. Then you have id tempus, ei maxime idoneum fugae esse videbatur. Okay, so id tempus means this time. So this time seemed to be. Videbatur is your seemed part. And then you just have esse. So seemed to be suitable, right? Maxime means like the most suitable, idoneum. The most suitable for flight, to him, rather. So the most suitable to him, for flight, fugae. Okay, so this is when he thinks it's the best time to leave. Then you have nunc Daedalus, filio parvo alas dat et memor magni periculi sic Icaro monet. So now Daedalus gives to his small son, right, to Icarus, he gives him alas, he gives him wings. Okay, so the wings that he made. And memor magni periculi, memor means mindful, and then you have the genitive, so mindful of the great danger, right? He warns Icarus, monet Icarum, right? He warns him, seek, thus, or in this way. I think in this way is easier. So he warns him, and he says, si superior volabis, sol ceram sole. Si inferior volabis, aqua alas tanget et te impediet. So he says, if you will fly, volabis, right? So if you will fly superior, higher, meaning high up in the sky, the sun, the soul et ceram, the sun will melt the wax, right? So the wax holding the wings together. So he's saying, don't go too high, right? Or the sun is going to melt the wax. Then he says, if you will fly volabis inferior, meaning too low or lower, the water will touch. So aqua tanget, it will touch the wings, the alas, and it will hinder you, te impediet. It's a clever way of saying, it's going to make it so that you can't fly. Your wings will be too heavy and they'll get all stuck together is kind of the idea. So he says, you can't go too high, you can't go too low. And he says, inter haec pericula volare debemus, right? So between these dangers, haec pericula, right? Between these dangers, we ought to fly. Debemus volare, right? You have the complementary infinitive there. We should fly, or we ought to fly. Then he says, ego primus volabo, tu post me volabis. And that ends his sort of quote or warning to his son. So he says, I will fly, ego volabo, primus first. you, right, two, talking to Icarus, he says, you will fly, Wolabus, after me, post-May. So he's saying, you're going to come after me, I'll go first, you follow behind. And if we pause it here, if you happen to take a look at the culture unit I put in the previous video, right, it's on Patria Potestas, this story kind of rings true to a Roman audience because you're supposed to obey your father is the idea. That's what Patria Potestas is all about. So we have an instance here where Icarus is getting direct orders from his father on what to do, and he's not going to follow him, as we see, and bad things are going to happen, right? So that's kind of the cultural background happening with this story as well, or at least how the Romans interpreted it. So then you go on to the next part, and you have nunc demum, ambo sunt in caelo. Okay, so now both are in the sky. Demum means like at last. So now at last, ambo sunt in caelo, both, right, people, both of them are in the sky. Ei qui daedalum et Icarum per caelum volante spectant maxime commoventur. So those who, ei qui means just those who. So those who spectant see Daedalus and Icarus, volantes per caelum, right, flying through the sky. So those who see them flying through the sky are greatly moved, commoventur maxime, right? So they're very like emotionally moved. It would be a powerful thing to see. Then you have A's, Daedalus et Icarus Dei esse videntor, nam Dei soli caelum obtinent et volare possunt. So to them, meaning to the people watching, Daedalus and Icarus seem to be, esse videntor, they seem to be gods, Dei, right? They look like gods. For, or because, nam, right? Only gods, or gods alone, you might say, Dei soli. Gods alone, obtinent caelum, hold the sky. Right, so only gods possess or hold the sky and are able to fly. Volare possum. So they're saying if you were looking on, you'd think that they're gods because human beings are not meant to fly, right? They're not able to. Then you have sine mora per caelum clarum volant. So without delay, they fly, meaning Daedalus and Icarus. They fly through the clear sky, the caelum clarum. Okay. Then you have Graecia propior et clario esse videtur. So Greece, remember they're trying to get back to Greece. Greece seems to be, esse videtur, it seems to be closer, propior, and brighter or clearer, clarior, right? So they're flying out and they're starting to kind of clearly see where Greece is coming from Crete. Okay. Then you have Icarus per caelum volans est laetissimus. So Icarus flying, volans is your present participle. So flying through the sky, per caelum, he is laetissimus. He is very happy, right? So he's having a great time because he's able to fly. Then you have sed propior soli esse volt, right? But he wants, right, volt, he wants to fly, right, or to be, I guess, esse, he wants to be closer to the sun, propior soli. So he wants to get closer to the sun. Mox est verborum patris oblitus, ad solem volat. So soon he is oblitus, he is forgetful, right, of the words of his father, verborum patris. You have the double genitive happening here. So of the words of his father. So he doesn't remember what his dad said. And he flies, volat, ad solem, to the sun. Nonne consilia patris Icare memoria tenes. So we have questions here. It's almost like the narrator is talking to Icarus, who obviously can't hear him. But he says, surely, remember you're asking a yes or no question, you're expecting a yes. So it says, surely Icarus, Icare is vocative there. You hold in memory, memoria tenes, it means you remember, but literally you hold in memory the consilia patris, the plan of your father, the plans of your father. So it's saying, surely you remember your dad's plan, right? Nonne Graeciam videre vis. Right, so surely you wish to see Greece, right? Graeciam videre. So he says, don't you want to go back and see Greece again? Pater filium ad solem volantem videt et iterum eum monet. So the father sees his son, videt filium, right? So it's saying the dad sees his son, volantem solem, ad solem rather. So flying toward the sun, and again, iterum, he warns him, eum monet. So he sees what's happening, and Daedalus again says, you know what, we're not supposed to be doing this, right? Bring it down a little bit. Then you end this part with this line. You have eis verba frustra dicuntur nam solceram solet. So his words, right, literally the words of him, eus verba, right, the words of him or his words are said, dicuntur is passive voice, they are said in vain, frustra, right? So his words are said in vain for, or because, sol keram solit, the sun melts or dissolves the wax. So it's too late. Icarus goes too close to the sun has melted his wax, and now things are going to go horribly for him, okay? So we end with this, and you have nunt Icarus perteritus volare temptat. So now Icarus, frightened, right, terrified, perteritus, so terrified Icarus tries to fly, volare temptat. So he's trying to fly, but it's already too late. Said volare non potest, alae amituntur. So, but he is not able, non potest, he's not able to fly because his wings, his alae, right, the wings amituntur, the wings loosened. Right, they are loosened, or they're loose, so it's not going to work. The wings fell off. In mare cadet, he falls into the sea. Right, so he falls in because his wings are already melted and have fallen off. Daedalus fuit miserimus et domum volare noluit. So Daedalus was miserimus. He was very miserable, the most miserable. You have your superlative there. So he was very miserable, and he did not want to fly home. Domum volare. So he didn't want to do it. So instead, you have in mare corpus filii, or filii rather, petivet et invenit. So he looked for and found, right, petivet et invenit. So he looked for and he found the corpus filii, the body of his son, in mare, in the ocean. So he goes back and he finds his son. Then, right, tum pater solus volavit. Then the father flew alone, right? So he flew by himself because his son is already dead. Okay, so this is the sad story of Daedalus and Icarus. It's one that's really popular, right? You might have already heard this myth before, but it's an interesting mindset into the Roman mentality. And I mentioned that idea of pater potestas, right? You're supposed to follow what your father says, and this is an example of what happens when you don't, right? Dad said stay in the middle. The son gets too excited. Icarus flies up into the sky, and things go horribly, and he dies, right? And this is why this area where he allegedly sank is called the Icarian Sea, right? It still holds his name today. Okay, so hopefully this made some sense, right? And you're able to work your way through and kind of understand what was going on without too